Let's talk about cottage cheese. Wow, cottage cheese is everywhere right now. People are blending it into wraps, turning it into bagels, even making ice cream out of it. And why? Because it's being hailed as a low-calorie protein powerhouse. But is it really the health food everyone claims it to be? Let's get into it. All right, what is cottage cheese? What causes all those lumps? Well, cottage cheese starts with milk, and it's coming from usually cows. But every now and then we do see cottage cheese from goat and sheep milks. What happens is the milk is lightly heated, and then it's combined with, in most cases, an acid or rennet, which, believe it or not, comes from the inside of cow stomachs, which then causes it to curdle. Now, the curdling process separates out the solid curds from the liquid whey. Most of us learned the expression curds and whey. So the curds are primarily casein, and the whey, as you might expect, is the other main component of milk, which is whey protein. The whey is also in the water, and the curds, the reason they're kind of solid is that they're pretty much solid casein. The curds are then cut into small pieces. They're heated further, and then they're stirred even more to expel more whey. Now they're drained. The curds are then rinsed in cool water, usually lightly salted, and that creates that signature texture. Now, why does cottage cheese have lumps? Well, those lumps are the actual curds. They're clumps of coagulated milk proteins, casein. Now, unlike smooth cheeses, cottage cheese curds aren't pressed together, so they retain their loose, bouncy texture. The final texture depends on how much the curds are broken up during processing. Some varieties have smaller, finer curds, while others are larger and chunkier. Okay, this is trendy, but this trend isn't new. It was big in the Atkins diet in the 70s, and it's coming around again. There's usually nothing new. It just becomes a new, fun thing to talk about. So let's talk about cottage cheese. Is it really healthy? Well, at first glance, cottage cheese seems like a great option. It's high in protein, low in calories, and packed with calcium. But there are a few major concerns most people overlook. In the United States, cottage cheese, for the most part, is made with A1 casein. Casein A1 is a really interesting inflammatory trigger that can trigger inflammation, can cause leaky gut, and even autoimmune problems in many people. If you've ever felt bloated after eating dairy, A1 casein is likely to be the culprit, not lactose. Now, there is such a thing as goat cheese or sheep cheese, cottage cheese. I haven't seen it in America, but this would be a much better option. But here's my big problem with cottage cheese. Cottage cheese, any milk from a cow, from a goat, from a sheep, is very high in a sugar molecule that I've talked a lot about, that I've written a lot about, called Nu-5-GC. Nu-5-GC causes inflammation, and it correlates with an elevated risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease, joint disease, neurodegeneration, and it's even associated with cancer. When you eat Nu-5-GC, and this has been proven in human beings, you make antibodies to Nu-5-GC as a foreign invader, which leads to long-term inflammatory responses. Does that sound like a good idea? I don't think so. Well, what can you do about that? As I've written about and talked a lot about, the fermentation product of cow's milk, goat milk, and sheep milk, fermentation, bacterial fermentation, eats Nu-5-GC. They love it. It's a sugar molecule. And so fermented cheeses, traditionally prepared fermented cheeses, don't have new 5-GC. There are fermented cultured cottage cheeses. And if you're going to use one, I really ask you to find them. In my opinion, it's the only safe cottage cheese. Now, cottage cheese does contain saturated fat. Now, while some fat is good, conventional cottage cheese can often contain a lot of unhealthy saturated fats from grain-fed cows, which may contribute more to inflammation. Now, it usually depends on how creamy the cottage cheese is. And let's face it, we kind of like creamy cottage cheese. And that usually indicates how much residual fat is in that cottage cheese. Now, it actually may have added sugars. Many flavored or low-fat cottage cheese brands actually add sugar to enhance the taste, which can spike your blood sugar levels and negate its health benefits. All right, number 2, is cottage cheese actually a good source of protein? Yes, it contains protein. But folks, we in America are over-proteinized. Now, many people don't believe me and Walter Longo from USC about the fact that we eat far too much protein. But I urge you to watch Professor Christopher Gardner's videos from Stanford, who's the head of nutrition at Stanford. I urge you to watch one of his short videos about how the USDA protein requirements came about. It turns out that our USDA recommended protein, daily protein, is actually 2 times what the normal person would need on a daily basis to meet their protein requirements. Why? Because they want to make sure that 95% of all Americans would actually meet their protein requirements. But most of us don't need that. Now, the sad thing is Americans eat twice the recommended amount. So most Americans are actually eating 4 times the amount of protein that they actually need. And just remember, protein is only needed for tissue repair work, for bone work, and if you're actively building muscle, to actively build muscle. In fact, again, look at some of Professor Gardner's work about, and we can quibble about this, about 82% of the protein that you consume is actually converted into sugar through what's called gluconeogenesis. Why? We do not have a storage system for protein. We have a storage system for glucose, which is not very big, but it's called glycogen, and it's in your liver and also in your muscles. But we have an unlimited storage system for sugar if we convert it into fat. And we do not waste calories. So if we're not building muscles, if we're not repairing bones, and quite honestly, we're not doing that very much, then any extra protein is converted to sugar, which we can burn as calories, or store as glycogen, or store as fat. And that's why most of the protein we eat isn't becoming what you think it is. Now, if you're looking for protein, one of the things I urge you to realize is that many years ago, our ancestors, our great-great-great-grandparents, ate whole food, and they ate the whole food whole. They had a piece of beef as an example of protein, and it took them quite a long time for their digestive enzymes to break down that piece of meat into individual amino acids to absorb, which means that that protein actually trickled into your system. Now, imagine if you have cottage cheese. Let's make sure you're getting cultured cottage cheese. You're still going to have some time to break down those lumps of protein into amino acids. That's fine with me, but that's very different if you then blend that cottage cheese into a protein shake, or worse yet, blend it with more protein, powdered protein, your body then instantly has these proteins literally pre-digested. And your body is hit with a wham of protein with, quite frankly, no place to put it except to turn it into sugar for storage. And that's one of the big problems with all of these other sources of protein. Are there better protein alternatives? Certainly pasture-raised eggs are a good source. They're actually a complete protein with added choline and, believe it or not, arachidonic acid for your brain health. Most people find this hard to believe, but your brain is about 60 to 70% fat. And the two main fats in your brain are DHA, the long-chain omega-3 fat, and spoiler alert, the long-chain evil omega-6 fat, arachidonic acid. Why is it evil? Because it's the inflammatory omega-6 fat. If it's so evil, then how come half of your brain is made up of this evil omega-6 fat? The reason? It's essential for brain health. And one of the greatest sources of this arachidonic acid is an egg yolk. So go for it. How about wild-caught salmon? It's got plenty of protein. It's got plenty of DHA. How about wild shellfish? Shrimp are a phenomenal source of arachidonic acid. Now, there are plant-based options like hemp seeds, like sacha inchi seeds, for example, and sardines. You can do the boneless, skinless if you'll start to eat them, and there's plenty of places to get it. All right, number 3, how about all these viral cottage cheese recipes? A cottage cheese wrap. Number 1, it's not approved if it's made with casein A1 dairy and excess sodium and possible added sugars. Why would you do that? I mean, try a cassava or an almond flour wrap. Or, imagine this, how about a lettuce wrap? Even better. A cottage cheese bagel? Again, if it's A1 based, it's a no-go. There are plenty of alternative ways of wrapping something in a bread-like substance, and just check out my books for more examples. The other thing is, check out Jamie Maitland's unicorn buns. They're made with egg whites and allulose. They're a hamburger bun. And you can also eat them kind of as a dessert. They have a slightly sweet taste. And you know I love allulose. How about cottage cheese ice cream? I mean, come on, really? A1 dairy plus added sugar? This is not a health food. Try blending frozen avocado allulose. I mean, check out my recipes on this YouTube channel for the best chocolate avocado ice cream you'll ever have. Number 4, the best cottage cheese alternatives. Okay, if you love the taste and texture of cottage cheese, but you want to avoid the hidden health risks, here are some better options. Just use fermented cottage cheese. It will be fine. Get some Parmesan cheese to make crackers, to make wraps. You just shred it, and you can do most things you can do with any cottage cheese. And remember, just because a food is trending doesn't mean it's truly healthy.
More amazing episodes just like this one. Watch now. Low sugar, low sodium, whole grain, low fat, dairy free. You will see these buzzwords on packaging all over the supermarket aisles.